Russia's strategy of warfare is nothing short of terrifying. While Western media keeps shouting about Russia's so-called defeats, you're fed inflated loss numbers and stories that collapse the moment you look deeper. Because behind the smoke and propaganda lies a secret the West is terrified to admit. Russia has already proven that its strategy to counter and cripple the US military, especially its Air Force, works nearly flawlessly. And despite the headlines and the noise, the numbers quietly tilt in Russia's favor. This topic is extremely sensitive, and YouTube limits how much we can reveal. For the full picture, the raw details, head to our Telegram channel, linked below. But remember, the most shocking part comes at the end of this video. So stay with me till the final moment. You've probably heard the ridiculous claims about massive Russian air losses, Ukraine shooting down 70 Russian jets in just one day, or over 100 Su-35s destroyed. At this point, Zelensky might as well go on TV and say, "I personally shot down a Su-57 and Putin was the pilot." That's how absurd the numbers have become. But what's the truth? Russia does hide its losses, but not because they're catastrophic. Any nation at war takes casualties. Russia simply knows that every number it reveals will be weaponized in the information war. So let's look at the Russian Air Force realistically. Yes, Russia has lost some aircraft, Su-35s, Su-34s. That's unavoidable in any conflict. But the picture changes when we look at the Su-57, the jet Western media loves to mock Russia for not using. The truth is, Russia has used the Su-57 many times. It even shot down a Ukrainian Su-27 from almost 300 kilometers away and carried out multiple precision strikes with standoff munitions. So why has the Su-57 never entered deep Ukrainian airspace? Because it doesn't need to. No weapon on Earth is invincible. Remember the American F-117? It was decades ahead of its time, yet an outdated Soviet-era SAM brought it down. The US is still mocked for that incident today. Russia understands this perfectly. That's why it doesn't gamble its Su-57 deep inside Ukraine when it can strike from far beyond danger. But here's the twist no one wants to talk about. Even with the few aircraft Russia has lost, the overall Russian Air Force performance actually proves something shocking. The Russian Air Force, unlike its American counterpart, has proven it can go toe-to-toe with modern cutting-edge weaponry. But the billion-dollar question is this: how are they pulling it off? The Russian Air Force fights in a way the West barely understands. In offensive missions, Russia prefers long-range standoff strikes, missiles launched by heavy bombers from hundreds of kilometers away. This strategy was pioneered by the Soviets, vast fleets of long-range bombers releasing waves of low-flying supersonic cruise missiles designed to wipe out entire American carrier groups. Unlike the US, which uses stealth aircraft to slip close to a target, Russia relies on something fundamentally different: a defensive air dominance doctrine. Russian fighters are designed to operate close to powerful air defense networks like the S-400. If they're overwhelmed by a numerically superior enemy, they simply pull back toward their SAM coverage. There, ground radar and A-50 AWACS combine to give them total situational awareness, even against stealth aircraft. It's a genius method for fighting a stronger adversary. And we know it works, because Ukraine uses the exact same tactic against Russia. Ukrainian jets constantly try to bait Russian fighters into chasing them into hidden SAM zones, systems kept offline until the last second, then suddenly activated to fire at Russian aircraft. The American Patriot is perfect for this ambush-style strategy. But here's the problem. The Su-35 is extremely agile, flies low and fast, and carries one of the most powerful jamming suites in the world. Yes, a few Su-35s have been shot down, but most survive these traps, outmaneuvering missiles at treetop height while jamming their guidance systems. There is, however, a fatal flaw in the Ukrainian version of this strategy. You need massive missile production capacity. Russia has enormous factories producing S-400 missiles. Ukraine doesn't. That's why Patriot batteries from all over the world, even the ones meant for China and Iran, were suddenly rerouted to Ukraine. Russia's drones and airstrikes are bleeding Ukraine's air defenses dry. Now imagine, for a moment, that the US Air Force launched an attack on Russia. Ignoring nuclear weapons entirely, just for argument's sake, the US would suffer devastating casualties before even reaching its targets. That's why Washington uses Ukraine to test weapons and strategies it doesn't dare use itself. And after years of this proxy war, the result is undeniable. The West threw its best weapons at Russia, and they failed. But that's only the defensive side. What about Russia's offensive capability? That's where things get truly interesting, because next we compare Russia directly to the United States. Every time I watch American YouTubers with military backgrounds, they mock Russia's performance in Ukraine, but they never talk about their own humiliating failures against the Houthis. And think about this, the Houthis don't even control all of Yemen. They control less than half the country, under sanctions, with extremely limited resources, yet they still manage to embarrass the US military. Now compare that to Ukraine, a fully united country backed by over 40 nations, armed, funded, and supplied by the entire Western world. Russia is fighting not just Ukraine, but the combined military-industrial capacity of the West, while being hit with more sanctions than North Korea, almost 20 times more. 1% of this pressure collapsed Syria and Libya, yet Russia is still standing. So it's not an exaggeration to say Russia is facing 100 times the pressure the US faced in Yemen. And still, the US couldn't even last 52 days. Trump claimed the Houthis surrendered and begged for a ceasefire. But just 4 hours after his speech, the Houthis fired at another US ship to prove he was lying. Yemen, one of the poorest countries on earth, defeated the United States in 52 days. That's a fact Western media will never admit. But how did the Houthis pull this off? They used old Soviet-era Buck-SAM systems upgraded by Iran, systems that came within inches of shooting down an F-35. Even the US admitted the pilot had to perform extreme maneuvers to survive. And don't forget the F-18 that Yemen shot down, which the US embarrassingly claimed was shot down by mistake, by themselves. Honestly, that excuse is even more humiliating than admitting the Yemenis shot it down. But the nightmare truly began when the US launched 80 Tomahawk missiles at Houthi targets and achieved absolutely nothing. Understand this clearly. The US only produces about 50 Tomahawks a year. They used more than a year's production in just 52 days, for zero results. And that's not even mentioning the SM-3 and SM-6 interceptors, each costing $4 to $7.5 million, trying to shoot down cheap Yemeni drones costing barely $20,000. Some analysts estimate the US burned through over 60% of its entire stockpile of these missiles in Yemen, only to ultimately run away with its tail between its legs. Now look at Russia, and the difference becomes undeniable. People who doubted everything you heard in this video can now see it clearly. The United States is not even close to Russia in real military capability. Russia's Air Force went against the best weapons the West could offer, and won. America went against 1970s-era missile systems and lost. Russian ground forces with obsolete tanks like the T-72 went up against Abrams, Leopard 2s and Challengers and destroyed them. Yes, Russia has taken losses, every army does. But you decide for yourself, who performed better, who is truly battle-ready, and who is only strong in Hollywood movies. For uncensored content, join our Telegram channel linked below, and remember to support us with a like, subscribe and share. Without your support, our mission would fail, just like the US in Yemen. This is Eastwind Brigade, where our voice unites, and we rise together.